If you're just joining us, please stand by while everybody else comes into the call. Okay, oh, people are still joining. Okay. All right. Hope we can get started here. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Item 1.1 is the call to order of the May 12th, 2020 Governing Board of Trustees special meeting at 5:02 p.m. By law and board policy, I must notify you that this meeting is being recorded. First, we'll have our roll call, item 1.2. Roll call of board members present. Member Fitzpatrick.
Here. Present.
Member Mock.
Present.
Member Raffner.
Present.
Member Wooden.
Present.
And I am also present, so all governing board members are present. The Governor of California has declared a state of emergency to exist in California as a result of the threat of COVID-19, aka coronavirus. The Governor issued Executive Order N2520, which directs Californians to follow public health directives, including canceling large gatherings. The Executive Order also allows local legislative bodies to hold meetings via conference and video calls, while still satisfying state transparency requirements. The Governor has also issued Executive Order N3320, prohibiting people from leaving their homes or places of residence except to access necessary supplies and services or to engage in specified critical infrastructure employment. The public's health and well-being are the top priority for the Del Mar Union School District's Governing Board of Trustees, and you're all urged to take appropriate health and safety precautions. To facilitate this process, the meeting of the Governing Board has been made available on the district's website. Members of the public who would like to address the Governing Board regarding an item on the agenda must go to the link provided at either the DMUSD website under News and Information or at the online agenda item 3.1 or 3.2 for a link to complete and submit the online request to provide public input form. The link to the request to provide public input form was made available beginning today at 4 p.m. in order to give the public an opportunity to complete a request to speak. The link will close at the start of agenda item 3.2. Once you have submitted the form, please click on the raise hand function at the bottom of your Zoom screen on your computer. Or, if calling in, dial *9 to raise your hand. This will let the meeting moderator know that you have submitted a speaker form and would like to address the board. Do not click raise hand unless you plan to address the board and have completed the request form. If you are unable to access the live link to the request to provide public input form prior to item 3.2, please email Holly Palmer at hpalmer@dmusd.org and click the raise hand function at the bottom of your Zoom screen on your computer, or if calling in, dial *9 to raise your hand. Item 2.1, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move approval.
Doug, is there a second?
I'll second.
Who's it going to be?
Catherine.
All right, Scott. Okay, so seconded by Scott Wooden, and let's do roll call vote. Member Fitzpatrick.
Aye.
Member Mock.
Aye.
Member Raffner.
Aye.
Member Wooden.
Aye.
And I approve. The motion to approve the agenda has passed. Item 3.1 is a public hearing, board information and approval. Open the public hearing for the submission of initial proposals for the open the public hearing for the submission of the initial proposals for the amending articles to the 2019-2022 DMUSD and DMCTA labor agreement related to the classified occupational therapists being represented by the Del Mar, California Teachers Association. Is there a motion to approve opening a public hearing?
I'll move to approve opening the public hearing.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Doug. Roll call vote. Member Fitzpatrick.
Aye.
Member Mock. Will be closed at the May 27th, 2020 regular Governing Board of Trustees meeting. Okay, so now we're going to move to item 3.2, public input concerning items on the agenda. This is a call for public input speaker requests regarding items on the agenda. Only items on the agenda may be addressed at a special board meeting. The link to submit a request is now closed. I am not going to repeat the instructions since I just went over them. So we are at item 4.1, board adoption, resolution number 2020-13, resolution of the Governing Board of Trustees of the Del Mar Union School District, considering written and oral public comments, considering responses to all comments, certifying a mitigated negative declaration regarding the proposed Del Mar Heights rebuild project, adopting mitigation measures, making findings of fact, approving the Del Mar Heights rebuild project, and delegating authority to staff to prepare and execute a notice of determination. Okay. So now I think we will move to our presentation with Chris Delahanty. And just to review the order, actually, Jonathan maybe doesn't need to stay in the call because the process is first we have a presentation by staff, then we will take any comments or questions from the board, then we will take public comment, and then we will go to board discussion before calling for a vote on this item. So let's turn it over to Chris Delahanty, who's going to present on this item.
Thank you very much, Erica. President Halpern, members of the board, Superintendent McClurg, it is my pleasure to present this evening on the mitigated negative declaration in response to comments. This evening, we will be presenting on the response to comments document that was provided and be able to respond to questions. We will be giving an overview of the CEQA process. We will go through those response to comments and again be able to answer any questions that you may have. In addition to myself tonight, we do have Dwayne Mears from PlaceWorks. Dwayne's a recognized industry leader in conducting environmental studies and facilities for schools and facilities projects. He's been involved in CEQA studies in hundreds of new builds, rebuilds, modernizations, and has been at this for over 30 years in California. So for this presentation, as Dwayne has been the expert consultant that has worked with us throughout the process, I am going to ask Dwayne to take over and present on the CEQA process and then on our response to comments. Dwayne, do we have you on? Just a minute. There he is.
Okay. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think that was my fault, Dwayne. I apologize. Trying to introduce you and get you started at the same time.
No problem. I'm getting hold on for just a second. I'm getting a pop-up. Good evening, and thank you, Chris. These are very interesting times, and I hope you can hear me well. And I'm not sure if you can see my video. I'm not quite sure why that's not working, but I'll continue. I'm going to talk a little bit about the CEQA process, not a whole lot of detail. We could spend all night on that, but I think it's important to cover a few things. First of all, there are 4 steps in the CEQA process, and I'll talk about where we've been and where we're going. The very first step is the preliminary review. Essentially, that's where we take a very first look at a project and look at how big it is, what are the possibilities about it. Even though it may be considered a project under CEQA, it may be exempt from CEQA as well. And so we look at that make a preliminary review and then decide whether or not we can stop at that point or need to continue. In this case, we decided we needed to continue to step 3. That's the initial study, which we've prepared and which you've reviewed. The third step is prepare and circulate a CEQA document. And that CEQA document, the kind of document that we choose depends on the results of the initial study and all the studies that are in there. Then we move on to the fourth step, and that's the board decision. And that has to do with tonight, whether you decide to approve the CEQA document and whether you decide to approve the project. And so, Chris, if you can go on to the next slide. So an initial study is a checklist. It starts with a checklist. There's 70 plus questions, everything from aesthetics to wildfire. Pretty much every conceivable physical impact you can think of is in there in a question of some sort. We conduct studies to determine whether the impacts are significant, and then also if they are significant, whether there's mitigation measures that are available. So if we've got mitigation that can reduce those to a less than significant level, that's what we'll do. We'll include mitigation. In this particular instance, we found potentially significant impacts in cultural, paleo, tribal cultural resources, and vibration. And in all 4 cases, we found mitigation measures that would have reduced those impacts to less than significant. And the cultural, paleo, tribal, those are issues that we don't necessarily think that there's an impact there, but it's one of those things where we may have resources that are buried that may be uncovered. And so we have fairly standard mitigation measures that are applied to those issues. And so that's why we have mitigation for those 3. Vibration has to do with the installation of paving, and there is some equipment that could cause issues with neighbors, and so we've got a mitigation measure in there for vibration. Now, in all other impact categories, we found those to be less than significant. So, Chris, if you will go to the next. CEQA is all about whether an impact is significant or not. And so it's important to just spend a moment here to talk about this. First of all, we're talking about physical changes in the environment. We're not talking about economic issues, social issues, moral issues. It's very narrow. It's physical environmental effects. And so if it's an adverse impact and it's substantial, it has to also be substantial. We will call that a significant impact. And so that's the difference. It's either we're on one side of that line or the other. It's less than significant or it's significant. And I will refer back to this. That's an important concept to understand. So next slide, Chris. So we're into the third step here, the CEQA process. We decided based on the conclusions we reached in the studies in the initial study, we decided to do a mitigated negative declaration. The word mitigated is in there simply because we have mitigation measures for those 4 impacts. That kind of document requires a 30-day public review process, and it ran from February 20th to March 30th. We extended it a bit, and so it was more than 30 days. So in that review process, we received written comments from the City of San Diego, the California Department of Parks and Recreation, Sierra Club North County Coastal Group, a law firm, Procopio Law Firm, Play Outside Del Mar, and then 23 additional comments from individuals. Now let me point out before we turn, this process with a mitigated negative declaration does not require that we prepare responses to comments. And you've seen the document, it's quite substantial, and intentionally so. We wanted to make sure that it's really clear what the basis is for our conclusions in the initial study and the mitigated negative declaration. So it's a very robust response to the comments we received. There's a lot of interest, of course, from the community. But it's not a specific requirement. Let's turn to the next slide. Final step in the process, I've already mentioned that you'll be considering today with all of the comments, the CEQA document, and you may decide to approve that document and then follow that with possible approval of the project. And then the final step in the CEQA process is filing of a notice of determination. And that's basically the end of the CEQA process. And this is where we are today, this final step. So Chris, next slide. Many of the comments we we received started with the premise that the project was going to increase student capacity. And if you increase student capacity, then the concern is, well, you've got more traffic. If there's a wildfire hazard, that's worse. You've got more pollution, noise, air pollution, et cetera. And so I think it's important to really take a look at this, these two tables. The very first table at the top is the student capacity for the existing campus based on district policy. And you'll see at the bottom right, 559 students is the existing capacity there. Now, the proposed plan capacity, again, based on district policy, is 537. So the actual capacity is being reduced. Why? Because we're eliminating one classroom. Now, there's been many things said about these other ways of calculating capacity. There's the state agency, OPSC, that has its own formula, but that has to do with qualifying for state funding, state matching funds. It does not dictate how you as a district will use your facility. And so it's really important to understand here that because so many of the comments were geared toward this, that we are not increasing student capacity as a result of this project. So it really does answer many of the questions that were raised. Next slide, Chris. Fire safety was one of the big issues that was raised. And this table shows you a comparison of the existing campus versus what it will be like with the proposed project. And so I'm just going to go down these because I think these are important points. Your existing campus has no fire hydrants. The proposed project has 4 fire hydrants. The closest building in the existing campus is only 5 feet from the canyon edge. The closest building under the proposed project, and I'm looking at the next column, of course, is 25 feet. So we're further away from the canyon edge. The closest classroom is 5 feet from the canyon edge. And of course, those are the same buildings, but those are classrooms within 5 feet of the canyon edge. The closest classrooms under the proposed plan are moved to the far eastern edge of the property. And I have a graphic that's going to follow here that will show you exactly where that is and the huge comparison between the two. The portables are made of combustible materials that they're now. They're not sprinklered. On the proposed project, you'll meet all current building codes for schools, non-combustible materials, et cetera, and it will be sprinklered. The existing campus has 1959 era buildings. The proposed project will all be fire marshal pre-approved buildings. We have a problem on the existing campus. We have a 10-foot wide fire lane and an existing bottleneck that restricts emergency vehicle access. Proposed project, 20-foot width fire lane, and the bottleneck is removed. We have, on the existing campus, we have a limited driveway that causes congestion and backs up into the neighborhood, but it also makes it very difficult for an emergency vehicle to come in and out and to evacuate the campus if you had to. Current project, proposed project, 24-foot width and 41-foot radii for the turnaround, which exceeds San Diego County standards. So we're improving that situation. I think many people don't understand that. And there's essentially a passing lane in that lane as well. So the bottom line, we reduce congestion and that will improve emergency vehicle access and evacuation times. Next slide shows this graphic that I was mentioning. So if you take a close look, there's 4 boxes, small boxes on the left side. That's the western edge. And you see in green, you see the slopes there in the topography. Those are only 5 feet from that edge. It's a concerning situation. Now, the comparison, so you're really seeing kind of both plans superimposed on one another. The buildings that are highlighted in red or kind of a rust color, those are classrooms buildings. And so you see how far away that is to that edge, from the canyon edge. I think that's quite dramatic. So let's move to the next slide. Transportation is certainly a big issue. And we all know that we've got a congestion problem in the neighborhood. We can't accommodate all the cars onto our site. And we don't have an efficient drop-off method. We don't have the space for it. So we have congestion. And what this is, the map on the left is showing the existing campus, and it is showing not the entire area, but it's showing that the queue extends into the neighborhood another 500 feet. And let me go over the table that's on the right here. Essentially, we're looking at how much space do we have on site for cars. And then you see vehicle storage length, that's how many cars we can accommodate within that space. The first two columns have to do with the existing campus. The second two columns have to do with the proposed campus, okay? So you see the problem right here on the existing condition. We only have 317 feet for cars. Our capacity for drop-off is only 15 cars on site. And we have an observed existing queue of 40. So we've got the demand for 40 cars and we have space for 15. So that's obviously why it's into the neighborhood. The other two columns on the right, we actually reduce the amount of queue that we need because of the efficiency that we have in our new drop-off system. So you see that we only need 700 feet, and which, in other words, we only need 35 cars at a time. And then the very far right column, queue capacity with the project, we've got 820 feet. Well, that's more than 700. So we have more capacity and on site, so we can bring all those cars on site and not have them back up into the neighborhood. What does that do? Well, it helps us with walking and biking. I mean, one of the concerns that people raised was, well, if you put in more parking and accommodate cars, you won't have kids walking and biking to the school. The truth is, it's a safety issue right now. And so if you improve this situation, reduce congestion, reduce some of the unfortunate things that happen during drop-off, you should expect that you can increase the number of kids walking and biking. You also have more cars idling, and that creates noise pollution, air pollution, etc. Not a good thing. Let's move to the next slide. Now, this is the same table on the right. I've just repeated it. But you'll see here, if the red line here is indicating that our queue is entirely within our campus. So we don't extend into that neighborhood. Let's move to the next. Recreation and green space has been a big concern to many community members. This is going to go back to my issue about CEQA and how it defines impacts. The loss of access to recreational space is not a CEQA issue. That's maybe a social issue or an economic one, but it's not a physical environmental issue. CEQA asks the question in a very different way, and it is limited to the physical environmental impacts that might occur as a result of the project. In this case, we still have public access to the site, and in fact, we have enhanced amenities. And we went into great detail of how the space is used and what's available afterwards, and you know, it's still going to be very attractive to the community and, of course, to the students as well. The bottom line in terms of CEQA is there's no significant impacts created at other recreational sites. In other words, we're accommodating them here. We're not going to have impacts at other sites. And so that's the bottom line in terms of recreation. Okay, let's move to the next slide. And I think this slide tells an important story. The yellow is the space available to the for rec space and is open to the community. This is community accessible space. And so I think this, and we have bar charts and other things that are in our detailed analysis, but I think this just visually shows you that there's still a lot of space available to obviously to the students, but also to the community. And so I think this demonstrates that some of the comments were exaggerated. Some of the impacts were exaggerated. I have one more slide if you want to turn to that. We received many batches of comment letters, and unfortunately there was one that was missed, and I want to apologize to Ms. Hyland Belding. In all of the blizzard of comments that we got, we just simply did not get this into the batch, and so it was not in our PDF, it was not numbered, and is not in our document. It is now. We have an attachment to it, and you see here that that we've considered her comments, responded to them in writing, but also her comments are very similar to many comments that we received, and they are dealt with in, I think, very good detail and answer her questions and her concerns in our master responses that you have before you tonight. And that ends my presentation.
Thank you, Dwayne. And now we also have Wendy Wiles, who we have asked to speak to just a couple of slides here. I will mention to the public, the presentation has been posted on our Del Mar Heights Rebuild page, so you do have access to this presentation as well. And Wendy is on as well, and I'm going to go to the next slide and let Wendy speak to the fair argument.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right. One of the issues that had been raised in several of the comment letters was the question of whether or not the mitigated negative declaration was really the appropriate CEQA document, or whether the district should have done an EIR, an environmental impact report. And the argument that has been raised by some of the comment letters is that there has been a fair argument that there is substantial evidence of a significant or potentially significant environmental effect, and therefore the district should have done an environmental impact report. You've heard Dwayne Mears from PlaceWorks respond to the various comments. And I think what's interesting is how many of the comments really never rose to the level of significance to begin with. And the 4 items that were potentially significant have been mitigated. So, however, when we see an argument that has been made that the document, the environmental document, may not be appropriate, of course, that's something that is of importance to the district. And so we have looked at this issue and looked at whether or not the project may have a significant effect on the environment. Here, as I've mentioned, the project has mitigated any of the potentially significant effects, and there is no substantial evidence that the project will have a significant effect on the environment. What is significant in this instance is that here you have a project which is an existing school, which, as Mr. Mears has already identified, had numerous conditions which really needed to be rectified for purposes of having the type of school and facility which the district wants. So the project in this instance is a project which is improving pre-existing conditions. It's not a project where you are creating environmental impacts, or significant or potentially significant environmental impacts. In each of the instances that you have seen, whether it's traffic, whether it's capacity, whether it's fire, in each of the areas in which comments have been made, the project in fact is providing improvements as opposed to providing impacts, negative, significant environmental impacts. And so really where you are in this situation is in a position where a mitigated negative declaration is the appropriate California environmental quality document for this project. And it would be appropriate for the board, as part of your analysis, to consider, of course, the comments that have been made, the responses that have been provided, and to consider the action of approving the mitigated negative declaration as part of your resolution this evening. And I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
And so with that, we would be happy to answer any questions the board may have. We have Wendy Wiles and Dwayne Mears here, as well as myself. And if the board, if there are any questions you may have, we'd be happy to answer them.
And I just want to clarify, Wendy, your use of the term significant is in no way indicating that the concerns of the public are not significant, but that's a term of art that's used in the CEQA document. But we believe all of the concerns are significant.
Absolutely, and thank you for clarifying that. The term of art, which is identifying whether an impact can rise to the level of significance or potentially significant, is an issue under the environmental potential impact, not to reflect upon what a community's concern may be.
I appreciate that. Dwayne, I have a question about defensible space around the school with regard to wildfires. Is there a regulation in terms of how much defensible space, and does this affect that, this new construction, does it affect that defensible space? And thirdly, is that something that's properly found within CEQA in this situation?
Well, we looked at the issue and basically concluded that the situation is an improvement over the current condition. We note that a couple things. One, that the fire marshal has approved the plan, pre-approved the plan. There's the issue of the 100 feet defensible space, and I think that's also a legal issue, but and Wendy can chime in as well on that particular part of it. But understand that this will be reviewed by DSA in terms of fire life safety issues, and all of that stuff will be very carefully reviewed.
And it's my understanding the border of the school remains the same, so the distance from the growth or the defensible space from the growth to the border of the school property will remain the same.
Well, I'm not sure I understand. I mean, you notice that the classrooms, for example, will be further away, and all buildings will be further away than the current condition, because you have buildings right now that are within 5 feet of the edge, and after it's completed, those buildings will be further away. Is that answering your question?
I think so. I'm trying to get to this defensible space concept, and I'm trying to wrap my arms around whether that defensible space is between property line and the state park or between the property line and the buildings. And it occurs to me that the state park, we can't do anything with the shrubberies or growth on the state park property, but you're saying that there's a 25-foot separation between that area and the buildings, right?
That's actually between 25 feet between the building and the edge of the slope. So you've got the edge of the slope that goes down, so you've got additional space there before you get to the reserve. And yes, it's true. I mean, I think it's worth mentioning that, I mean, the effort has been to be good stewards of the environment and not do something that would require impacts within the reserve. So that's one of the issues, to stay out of that, so we don't have biological impacts within the reserve.
And one more question about that separation. Around the school, there's going to be a track of sorts, correct?
That's correct.
And what is that material made of?
On the track in this area will be decomposed granite, and then there will be a combination of some concrete and grass that will be on the adjoining side here to the northwest of the multi-use space.
So in addition to any other separation or defensible space, we'll have that separation as well.
That's correct. And I think the other point, and Dwayne brought this up, but that needs to be made, is the improvement is we are moving students from classrooms here that are combustible, have no running water, to all of our students' general classrooms being on the east side of the campus. And so part of the goal was moving our students to the east side of the campus in a now fire sprinklered space that is a safer location than it currently is. So an improvement to the project.
And then my final question with regard to fire, the evacuation studies or concepts similar to that, is that something that's handled by the Department of State Architect when they look at the design of the project?
Well, let me answer a couple things. My review is in terms of CEQA and whether or not there's a significant impact. The DSA, Division of State Architect, and its review is something that's separate from that. And so my answers are really having to do with CEQA. Do we have an impact, significant impact that results from the plan? And the answer is no, and because of the studies that we've done that show that you are reducing congestion, you're providing better fire lanes, you're providing better access through the kind of the drop-off zone, so that if there is a real emergency, that you have the potential to get in with emergency vehicles, and you have the greater ability to evacuate the site as well.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions before we go to public comment?
Yeah, I have a question, or a couple questions here. So you talked about capacity we're reducing capacity. I know a lot of the comments talked about the original capacity as the school was built And I think we have to look at existing conditions. You can correct me if I'm wrong, versus what it was built in the 1950s. And what happens when a school is built and you decided to increase capacity like that? Are there further impact reports that are required?
Well, your school predates CEQA, and so I can't really speak to what might have been done between its original development and the passage of CEQA. So there's that kind of that issue. But there's a concept that I should bring up. It's called baseline. So when we get started on these projects, what we look is the term in CEQA is baseline, which is existing conditions. Okay. So we look at the capacity of what's there now, and then what is the impact of this project on that? And so in this case, we've got a net decline of student capacity.
And if you were in the future wanting to add portables, you need to do another sort of like a CEQA or an impact by putting in additional classroom space?
Yes, if you were to come in and add classrooms, it would be a project, quote unquote project under CEQA, and that triggers some type of review. Depending on how significant it is, it might be an exemption, or it might be a mitigated neg deck, or even an EIR. It just depends on what is proposed at that time. But yes, it would trigger something in CEQA. And
those portables, when were they put? I mean, they were put on well before I moved into this into the Carmel Valley area. Was there a review that happened when those got put in?
I can't speak to that.
And I don't have a record of the CEQA review, Scott, from that period of time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Jawar, Catherine, any questions before we go?
Yeah, I do. Hi, Dwayne. I just wanted, if you could just very briefly touch on what is going to be done to mitigate the 4 potentially significant impacts, the cultural, paleontological, tribal, and vibration impacts.
Well, hold on just a second. The resources, the cultural, paleo, and tribal, basically it is simply to have experts on hand. So in other words, you have an archaeologist who, when you're going to disturb the dirt and possibly reveal a resource there, you want somebody who's knowledgeable and can stop work if they have to retrieve the resource. So that's the kind of thing for those resource categories. The vibration issue has to do with a particular kind of equipment when you are putting the paving down. And so give me just a second and I'll look at this without my glasses. Basically, we were saying that if activity during construction is required within 25 feet of nearby residential structures, you use a static roller in lieu of a vibratory roller. It just is a kind of equipment that our noise and vibration experts know that can really be a problem for neighbors if you use a certain kind of equipment. And we can we can specify this and avoid the problem. So it's just a specification of a kind of equipment during construction.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
I just have a quick one. Maybe Chris, you can help me point it out real quick. You mentioned the bottleneck for the fire lane. Can you point that out for me? And like on the current existing, and then what it look like in the future?
Yeah, so a couple of the issues we have are, one, when you come into campus, we have the tight lane for where our cars are coming through. So they are coming in this area. I think that actually our traffic will show it. When we look at when we're coming in, you have, number one, the backup of traffic here, which causes a problem for us. And then we have, with cars in the street, it is an issue that we've had in the past. So when we've had an issue a few years ago at the school site, there were cars that were in the street. Getting cars out of the way and getting an emergency vehicle on was an issue. Having cars on site will then allow us to have lanes where if we stop traffic, an emergency vehicle could come through these excess lanes. We could potentially move cars to get them, into this fire lane or allow them to move around the back end if they need it on that fire lane. And so that improvement will provide more space and a better ability for emergency vehicles to get in there without being bottlenecked by the traffic that goes out into the community and the potential bottlenecks with the current existing condition of our drop-off and pickup zone.
Is there also like I read that there was like the bottleneck, specifically there was like a 10-foot difference between like a 10-foot and a 20-foot. Can you point that out to me?
We have issues with our fire lane here where the current MUR and classroom space comes out, and I know as we walk the campus, you see that we've actually removed some of the shields that are on the side here, just to add a little bit more space to get vehicles by. But that is our major issue. My cursor's going away. Where the 10-foot space, and now we'll have at least 20 feet of fire lane space in all the fire lanes that come around the campus.
Okay, thanks. It's just out of curiosity, what if it's like a 10-foot? What are can fire engines still access it right now, or is it a tight squeeze?
Be a very tight squeeze. The current code is 20 feet.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. Any other questions before we go to public comment? So we have possibly 3 hours of public comment here. Technically, we accept 20 hours of public comment, 20 minutes of public comment. So I just need the board to agree to allow all of these public comments on this item. So while we're waiting for Kelly to dial in, let's just go ahead and go to any board questions. And then we can get to comments. So are there any board members who would like to ask any questions following the public comment? I see a hand. Oh. Hand raised in the participant box. Do we have her? Okay. Well, I have a question, and this may be for Dwayne. So one of the...
Erica, if you want, I do see Kelly Huggett now. Do you want to give...
Okay, let's get her. Yep. Okay, Kelly, go ahead. We can't hear you. There's no audio.
I don't see any audio. I'm not. Kelly, if you reach out to Holly Palmer, she could help you with how to get on, I think.
Okay, so my question for Dwayne was one of the topics that was raised about the stormwater outfalls and the extension. I know it was addressed in the 370-page document that I read, but it wasn't really covered in the presentation. So can you just talk about the improvements to the outfalls and how that's all being managed? You're muted. Chris may need to unmute you. I don't know. There you go. You're unmuted.
Okay, now you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you've got an existing problem at the two outfalls. It is causing damage on the slope and the biological resources there. The proposed project includes improvements so that problem will disappear. We also indicated information about the kinds of seeds that you'd use, the kind of landscaping, the plant material that you'd use. And I think that answers it. I mean, the situation will fix an existing problem and improve the situation. And so we called it less than significant.
Okay, thank you for that. Kelly Huggett, I still see her box there, Chris, but is she able to speak? No.
Holly's reaching out. Kelly Palmer's reaching out to her to see if we can get her to call in and use the phone because the audio seems to not be working.
Okay, so just interrupt me when she comes back on.
Sure.
Okay, so my other question was, I'm not sure who this is directed to, but it's regarding, do we have a fire evacuation plan for the school? So that may go to Chris or it may go to Dwayne.
I'll be glad to answer, give you my answer to that.
Thank you.
What we do is we look at the existing condition, our baseline, and we look at the change that's proposed from the project. Okay. In this particular case, one, we've demonstrated that we are not going to increase the capacities of the school. So we're not going to have more traffic, more people there that we have to evacuate. That's number one. Number two, we are improving the situation. So we've got more capacity there to move cars in and out. That means emergency vehicles in and evacuation. And so our question there, again, our question is, would the project create a significant impact? What we've demonstrated is that, in fact, the situation will be improved. Could you also do an evacuation study, a time study? Yes, you could do those things. But we've answered the question, I think, very clearly, that you would not have a significant impact. In fact, you'd have a better situation in terms of evacuating that site in an emergency.
Okay, thank you. And then this one might be for Holly, I'm not sure, but can you address when the school district's plan for managing a return to school during COVID would be discussed?
Yes, we're currently and have been working with the County Office of Education, health experts, and right now it's under the direction of the governor. So as the governor moves forward and gives that direction, then our local health department will make decisions concerning our county that will tell us what our guidelines are and any modifications that we would be working under. Given that, we've established a committee. We're already actively working on the potential scenarios, and some of them were mentioned tonight, that we would be ready to put in place, looking at, what all of our school sites, what we could possibly be presented with, and how we obviously have our children in school and have them under the guidelines that were given. Obviously with the intent of, and with the primary mission of keeping everybody safe and in school.
Okay, thank you. Other board members, do you have questions? Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just following up with the COVID. I know people are concerned about putting more students in Ocean Air or Del Mar Hills. I think the issue with social distancing, though, is the individual classrooms. And the classrooms aren't going to have any more students. I don't know any school that's operating at 50% capacity where you're able to split the students up into double the number of classrooms and double the number of teachers in order to be able to do that. So I don't know how you plan on doing, or what the thoughts are for social distancing within the classroom. I mean, we actually have small class sizes, so we're going to be better able to do that than say some other districts that have 30, 40 students in the class.
Right. And again, it will be direction and guidance from our health department that will tell us numbers of students, what social distancing means at that time and in schools. And we're working on what potentially we would need to look at regarding space. You're right. We do have lower class sizes, significantly lower class sizes when we're thinking about looking at a middle school or a high school. And we have a lot of space at our schools. So we're fortunate in that way as well. We're looking at all of those things.
And I would want to ask a little bit about the fire stuff. I mean, can someone explain to me the fire check process, like kind of what the approval process is for that? Because I understand that this project has been pre-approved by the fire marshal. What goes into that? And are there additional steps? Are there steps that the DSA will take into determining whether or not there's a fire safety?
So I'll start with our our architects, Baker Nowicki, have gone through the process of working with the fire marshal for the first step. And so they've shared the design and worked with the fire marshal to look at, does this design meet their basic requirements? I know that Wendy Wiles was also has a little bit of information she could share related to fire, and so I'd ask maybe if she could add.
Sure, thank you. With regard to the fire issue, there's really a couple issues that come up. First, there was the question of the requirement for the area around the school and what the district was doing with regard to the setback area. And that, first of all, is not necessarily an environmental issue. It really relates to how the school should be built. The statute that had been cited, the legislation that had been cited in one of the comment letters, Public Resources Code 4291, doesn't apply to public agencies. But the issue is not that we don't want to consider those consequences. As Mr. Mears has referenced, obviously the district cares very much about any fire safety issues and how that can be accommodated. So beyond looking at the environmental issues associated with the project, the district would then submit its plans to the Division of State Architect, and the Division of State Architect would be looking at the proposed plans to determine whether or not it meets the life safety requirements necessary for a school site. So it's a broader analysis than just what's being done now. The current analysis with the mitigated neg deck is looking at whether or not the proposed project is creating environmental issues, environmental impacts that are significant. But beyond that, there are further levels of analysis that would look at the school site and how it's proposed to be constructed to make sure that it meets the safety requirements for the state of California.
So it sounds like it's those issues may be a little bit separate from the current MND issue. But can someone also explain to me why we have been pre-approved by a fire marshal? I don't think I heard that.
So I don't know about why, but the process was I would speak to the process. So the process is that as our architects are going through, they reach out to the fire marshal and they look at, are there issues that you see? They talk about where we would have the need for hydrants, how we'd be able to address the sprinkling, the ability to fight fire on that campus. And that is sort of the pre-approval process that architects go through. It's reaching out to them to make sure that we are setting up this campus and designing this campus in a way that the fire department can adequately protect in the event of a fire.
Okay, we're going to pause for a minute and try to get Kelly Huggett back one more time. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Let's go back to Jiwa where we left off. I wasn't sure if I interrupted you, Jiwa, if you had more questions.
I do have more, but I mean, if you guys want to move on to something, if there's something else, you can head towards that.
Okay, do others have questions or comments?
Well, I have a question for Wendy and for Dwayne. Never having gone through the rebuild of a school with questions about EIRs and these mitigation documents. What's your experience? Is the plan generally changed in an EIR? Because when I'm looking at Cardiff, there's no change in plan, and the only thing that changes is money. And as I've said before, I'm not interested in spending taxpayer dollars to defend something that's going to end up back where we are. It makes absolutely no sense. So I'd be interested in your experience, Wendy and Dwayne. What is the end game here for this EIR situation?
Let me take the first shot at that. An environmental impact report does have additional requirements. including alternatives. So we would have to look at different alternatives. You'd have to develop the alternatives and then compare those to the project and to the what we call the no project alternative, which is to keep the campus the way it is and keep the kids there. It's a lengthier process. It's more money, but essentially look at all the analysis that we've already done here. I mean, we basically would be taking the analysis that we've done and putting it into a new format, an EIR, and then starting over again with a note, what they call a notice of preparation. And that would be a 30-day process. Then we would produce the draft EIR. That would go out for 45 days, collect more comments, go through another response to comments process, create that final EIR, have that posted for 10 days before you can come back. And so essentially it's more money, more time, but we've already done the analysis. I think we know what the conclusions are. Could we add and do more analysis? We can always spend more environmental dollars, that's for sure.
Sorry, just to add on to that, I think Dwayne focuses on one of the points that I think is important and may not be fully appreciated by perhaps the community. When a mitigated negative declaration is prepared, there are not typically consideration of the comments included. So an environmental impact report requires that the comments then be responded to for purposes of considering the EIR. But what PlaceWorks has done, what Mr. Mears has included, is already that analysis, consideration of each of the comments, and then responding to each of those comments for purposes of determining whether or not really further analysis should be required or should be performed. It is true that if a challenge were made to the project, yes, the district would be involved in a lawsuit, and the issue before the court would be whether or not an EIR was required. And I think the comment that had been raised was, even if we go through this whole process and we spend all the money and all the time, will the project really change? And that really depends on what may occur. Really what normally is happening is it's a review of whether or not the project that has been considered necessitates the preparation of an EIR. And if it does, an EIR will be prepared with the alternatives that Dwayne Mears has identified. And then you're analyzing the same project. Of course, the district would be interested and has been interested in whether or not the project can be approved upon. And throughout this process of considering public comments, the project has been modified numerous times to take into consideration how the project might be improved. And so this analysis, which might occur as part of an EIR, has been something that I think the board and staff have participated with the community on, is to find the best project available. So we don't really know, of course, motivations for people and what might happen in a litigation process, but the district through this process of the MND has gone far beyond what is normally done for an MND.
Thank you. And I know myself, I've asked the architects to sharpen their pencils on a number of occasions, asking people to compromise on a number of occasions. I believe the district has gone out of their way to compromise in that regard. If we go down this road, and this isn't going to overlap with the COVID issues, if we go down this road and get approvals, is that necessarily, if we're ordered to stop construction by the governor, does the approval stand the test of time, or do we have to go through this again?
With regard to the challenge of COVID, if the decision to approve the mitigated negative declaration is made by the board and you move forward, the fact that you may have to stop because a separate issue, which is really not an environmental issue as much as it is a current condition of what's occurring in the community, which is relating to COVID-19 and the pandemic, that would not unravel your approval. We're in very unusual circumstances right now, of course, and haven't been in something like this before, but the approval, if the mitigated negative declaration is made and is upheld, that approval will withstand other elements that may happen, which may dictate what the district does for future operations for its schools. I don't know, Dwayne, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think it's good.
Can I just ask Wendy to clarify? Because my understanding of looking at what we're voting on tonight in terms of the resolution, it's essentially that we accept the MND and then we approve the project. If in terms of what does the project mean? Like, what happens if if COVID changes, like say transportation needs? Would we be able to modify those? And is that something that can be, that we approve right now? Can we still modify those things in the future?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the purpose for tonight is really looking at the analysis that has been done on the project. The project being the rebuilding of the Del Mar Heights campus, looking at the existing campus and its operations, and then considering how the project would be going forward. In other words, the rebuilding and modifications to the project. And those are the environmental issues. If in fact, let's say the governor came up with some COVID-19 modifications that needed to be made, those are really not necessarily related to the environmental issues that you are looking at now. Just like any district who's not going through an environmental proceeding right now, whatever district that might be, let's take Solano Beach. So if an order comes down from the governor or the health officers, which dictates some new activity by the district to accommodate responses to COVID-19, those are separate and independent from what you are looking at right now. It would be just as if you had never even had a rebuild project and had to consider how you would modify your operations going forward. They're really separate issues that the district would have to address.
So things like changes in construction plans or like a timeline may not, that doesn't have any effect. I mean, right now, if we vote to approve this, the MND, and then it still moves forward, and changes can be made.
Certainly. So I think that one of the questions would be, let's assume for a moment that the governor came out and then made a prohibition against any construction. There was some discussion, and in fact, that happened in Northern California. So there was a restriction on the type of construction activities that could occur in Northern California that did not happen in Southern California. And so if that were to occur, let's just say across the board, yes, that would stop construction. And so that would, of course, stop the district's construction as well. But that wouldn't then interfere with or change in any way the activities that had previously been done with regard to the environmental approval of the mitigated negative declaration or the approval of the project. It would just be something new that the district would have to take into consideration, really unrelated to environmental issues, more related to how the operations of the school district would be run going forward.
Thank you.
Catherine, did you have any questions?
Eric,
you guys have asked all the questions that I've had, actually. So I appreciate all the answers. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah. I think one of the kids brought up something that gave me a little pause. And somebody said, we want you to get started on the project next month. And so my question relates, and Chris, I think you might be the one to answer this question. If we start the construction next month, is that starting? First of all, are we able to do that in light of this and the need for DSA approval? Secondly, is that demolition of the site at that point? And if we demolish the site, and then there's this COVID resurgence, are we building in some sort of plan in that event? I want to anticipate every avenue, and have we given some consideration to let's get this approved, but see, walk slowly down the road towards demolishing, because I don't want to be in the shoes of Cardiff with the demolished school site and know where to go. So have you given any thought of that?
I think there are two questions in there, Doug. I'll start with the question around the building of the school. As you mentioned, DSA approval would still be needed. And so we would go through a process that would, should the board approve the project, we would be going through a process that would allow us to approve the project through DSA with looking at potentially going in and having a process that would allow you to have an increment of the project approved for grading and site work and things like that, we still would take a little bit of time to get to DSA and approve the project, and therefore any construction and demolition wouldn't start until probably the end of June, the beginning of July would probably be the earliest that we would start. We could still work through a timeline that's very similar to what we've talked about. But the second piece to that, so either way, if we were to move forward and we decided the next step would be we're working through bidding out the project, and that would come back to the board to approve a price for the project based on lease-leaseback agreement. So the board would approve that before we moved into any of the construction. When you look at the idea of do we need the space, do we need to consider what space we need for COVID-19, as Dr. McClurg shared, we have a committee that is actively working on that and actively working with the County Office of Education and with our county health leaders. And so while we have the direction again coming from the state right now, we are working as a district to ensure that we are forward thinking and forward planning so we know what we need over the summer and ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just jump along those lines? Oh, sorry, Scott, go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
Could we be proactive and reach out to DSA and see if they have given thought to construction and demolition of schools, given the current climate?
So I think that would actually go into, as Wendy spoke to there being some restrictions in Northern California. There have been, however, essential construction has continued to go on, even in Northern California, and continues. At this point, you do not have to declare it essential in Southern California, but construction has continued for schools. So based on what has happened to this point, it would appear that this would be essential construction. DSA will give us more of an approval as to the project itself and ensuring that we take into account and address a number of items related to safety and access. And so that's a process that we will, should the board approve, we would go through with DSA it's approving the project, but it's also making sure that all those items are in place and the project is put together in a manner that will be done safely and will allow for ADA access and fire life safety for our students, so that it's built in a manner that it will be a center of the community should there be an emergency, et cetera, over the course of the next 50 years.
So I was just going to bring up, with the COVID piece, we're just moving this down the road so that's continuing. If we pass a resolution for the mitigated negative declaration, it's moving it into DSA. There are still pieces to have to go forward before we'd even begin construction on the project. Like Chris said, it's going to be late June, beginning of July. A lot more will be known about COVID by that time. If it was something that we felt like we couldn't demolish the school, we could pull the trigger and say, stop it at that time. The other piece is, if this pandemic, I don't believe we will have this huge surge in the fall that's going to shut us all down again. But if we shut it all down, we won't have to worry about where the kids are going because they're going to be on our couches still. So if it goes back to lockdown conditions because we have another surge of COVID, the things that we're doing in the classrooms aren't going to really matter. I think what really is the case is, if it goes along as it's going right now, we have a baseline of COVID cases. We're going to have to socially distance. We're going to have some way to mitigate transmission. That's something that Holly and her staff are going to have to come up with, and it doesn't matter whether we're building a new school or not.
Okay, are there more questions? I have some comments, but I can wait until we finish with questions.
I just want to quickly say, with regards to COVID, I think the issue with parents is that they basically just want to know what the plans are. I mean, I know it's difficult to plan for things that, scientists are still discovering and learning about. And so I think it's just, to the extent that we can provide that information, I think that we should. And I know that Holly's now done a Wednesday briefing that is put online and it's posted to inform people about the updates, whatever the things that she's working with her committee on. And so I do appreciate that, and I think that please continue to do so, and please continue to inform people about how the process is working. I think that's really the main concern with parents, and is just, how is this going to affect their child? They don't want to bring this disease home with them, and so to keep that in consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If no one has any more questions, I do have a couple more. Just a couple quick ones. Can you, just a couple of things that came up while the comments were people were going through the comments. Chris, can you explain or talk about the learning center, the outdoor learning center up in the northwestern area? How will kids have access to that, and is it accessible to the public? Could you kind of talk about that a little bit?
So as we've been going through the design process, we've been looking at how we might make it accessible to students, and there have been a number of ideas that have come up. Things like, do we include a butterfly garden? Do we include other items that would allow it to have some interactive learning opportunities? So it is still part of the school campus. It is not just a community park. And that being said, there are times during the beginning of the school day where many of our campuses have space where some of the parents can hang out for a little bit right before school starts or right after. And so there's sort of this dual use that will come from that, in that we would have an ability to use as a school, but we will also have an amenity for our community for that beginning and end of school day that I think is beneficial. I mean, it helps to develop that community. So by keeping it as a resource for the school and being able to program it so that we can use it for a learning space, but also being able to keep it a little bit open, should benefit the whole school community.
Thanks. And my other quick question is just, could you talk about, Chris, how the plans are submitted to DSA, or what happened in February? I know you kind of went through this before, but this came up again through the comments, and I just, if you can clarify that, I think.
Sure. With a project this size, there's a pre-check process with DSA, and so we do not have, while we shared some plan documents so that we could get input from DSA, it was not a submittal to DSA, it didn't require a check to DSA, and it was an opportunity for us to go to DSA, share what we're thinking about with the plan, get input on that, and then be able to make improvements prior to going to DSA submittal. So there's really a positive benefit in being able to make some adjustments that will benefit the project going forward.
Thanks. Go ahead, Scott.
Did DSA make any suggestions when you did the pre-check?
They had some items about where we might have a firewall, or does that need a firewall, and where does a certain building end. And so there's certain pieces with how long a building is and how much connected space you have a building. At certain points you need a firewall. There are certain points where we have actually a break, and therefore it is able to not be one full building, and therefore you wouldn't need a firewall because you can block fire off at certain points. So items like that are helpful as the architects and the engineers are able to further develop the design and improve the design.
Were they looking at shelter in place in terms of when you put firewalls in there? Because if something came across the canyon into some of those common spaces, the classrooms are protected. They're over here on the east end. Is there a break there where students could possibly shelter in place, or is that something we would envision?
That was more with respect to where you might have a break in a building and ensuring that a fire wouldn't continue to proceed through a building. There is input on the general where we're going to have students shelter, how you're sprinkling the system to keep students safe. So the whole fire safety across the whole building will be addressed through the DSA process.
And you bring up an interesting point. All these people that are talking about fire safety and concerns about the fire hazard potential. It seems to me the school that's there now serves more of a hazard than anything else. And so I think that motivates a need to get rid of it and put something up that's safer from a fire perspective.
I had a question maybe Holly or Chris could address regarding how schools are insured and just in general how it's looking for our new school to be insured.
I wonder, Wendy, you may actually have a little more expertise in speaking to that from the legal perspective.
Well, with regard to insurance, the district participates in I want to say countywide insurance program. And so your school would go through I think is it a SELPA that you have?
JPA, Joint Powers Authority.
So, sorry, yes. And so in your JPA, your school, when you are doing the modifications, you would present the value and the issues related to the school, and that would then be insured through your JPA.
So an example might be about 5 years ago when we did a partial modernization of Carmel Del Mar. We had a surprise heavy rainstorm in, I think it was late June or early July, that actually ruined the flooring in a number of places. And that's an area where then you'd work through the JPA and work through actually getting more flooring into that school as a part of that process. But an example of an insurance time and how the JPA supported us.
And would we be looking at policies before we start construction, or is this going to go into effect and we reach out and modify our policy after the building has been constructed?
So we're currently insured through the JPA. So we already have our sites. We are part of that countywide JPA. So we wouldn't actually be changing the policy per se.
Do they have any requirements regarding fire safety, for example, like defensible space? Like some of the commenters tonight shared that their homes were no longer going to be able to be insured because they don't have the required amount of defensible space. Is that a factor for us?
We have not been informed of this. The JPA has not, much as the commenter mentioned, the insurance came to them and shared that there were new requirements. And we have had, we've been on this location for 60 years, and the JPA has not come to us at all in the recent past. They have not shared anything with us of any need or any change to our policies or anything that we would need to do to stay in compliance with our policy.
And Chris, did I hear correctly that there's more defensible space with this new design than there currently is now? So it's not like we're taking away space, we're increasing defensible space. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think that, when we circle back to this, the idea of CEQA and the environmental impact, and we look at, in this case, we are making an improvement to this site. And I think Dwayne mentioned that when he was looking at that slide, but if you look at where are our students, how are we pulled back from the canyon rim, and what are the materials of those structures, from a portable with no running water to a newly built to code structure with a sprinkler system. We have made dramatic improvements on that site with this project as compared to the current condition.
Okay. Are there more questions?
If no one has questions, I had just kind of some comments to wrap up. I don't know if anybody has anything else.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Okay. Yeah, basically, I had some fun reading.
Oh, you're muted.
Some fun reading this weekend. Yeah, sorry. And I went through the whole, all the responses, all of Mr. Mears' 370-page response. And so it was quite the enjoyable quarantine reading. But I do appreciate all your comments. I think they're very thorough. I think it addresses pretty much every issue with regards to environment that you can think about, or even, frankly, any kind of issue that the community has brought up. I have been disappointed that there has been a significant amount of misinformation that has been circulating in the community. And I would really urge anybody that is interested in finding out the pretty thorough explanations and getting significant supported facts to take a look at this document. Read just the first 67 pages or so. That pretty much gives you everything that's in there. It talks about school capacity, whether it's going to be 673, which is not, or 500, which it will be. Whether the school's going to be closing, whether the district's going to be closing the grounds to the community. All these things, fire safety, it's all addressed in there, and how the documents were submitted. If you read this document, it's in there. And personally, like I said, I've already gone through all this. So, with regards to the question of is the MND appropriate? I feel very confident in that, and I feel comfortable in Ms. Ramirez's work, and I feel comfortable in what the district has done. And lastly, I think that the design is clearly needed. I mean, the new plan is clearly needed. It is an improvement, obviously, on what exists right there. So I'm good to go.
Thank you, Jiwa. I'll also share some comments along those same lines, and this has been a really long process, but I really appreciate how many people care about the Delmar Heights rebuild. A school's at the heart of a community, and that's definitely the case here. So many kids and families have loved Delmar Heights School over its 61-year history. And many of those same kids, as we've heard even tonight, have come back to enroll their own children in this very school. And neighbors whose children have long since grown and moved away still feel the same attachment to the Heights that they felt back then. I am one of the people who loves Delmar Heights School. Our family chose to move here specifically so we could enroll our children at this school almost a decade ago. And we have grown to love the school, its people, and its spirit more and more since. There are many families who can tell the same story, and you've heard them again tonight. While I have always loved the school, much of the facility itself has been an embarrassment for years. My own children have gone to school grade after grade in what are thoroughly obsolete, decaying, temporary structures that are now more than 30 years old. At this very moment, there are termites breaking through the floor of my second grader's classroom, and various small invaders have even eaten away part of the storytime rug. As a volunteer in that classroom until 2 months ago, as another caller on the call mentioned, one of my jobs was to disinfect the tables where the rats would run overnight. This is not an acceptable condition in any classroom in any state, and it's certainly not something that we should expect our kids to live with. So few would dispute, and few do, that the time has come for a new facility that is safe, functional, and relevant for the education our kids need today. Now, I have dedicated my own time and energy to getting the Heights built since 2014, when I sat on the first facilities planning committee. So I can personally attest that over the past 6 years, there have been countless meetings, outreach, and engagement on how to update the school. And as a member of this school board, and currently as president, I can also attest that our board's priority has been to engage the whole community in the complicated, multifaceted, and creative exercise of envisioning the new school. And just because so many people really care about Delmar Heights School does not mean they all completely agree. And that is a good thing, because it means that over the years and months, many topics have been debated, revisited, and reconsidered. From the initial facilities planning meetings in 2014 to the Prop MM campaign, to the blank pieces of paper at the first architectural planning meetings more than a year ago, to each person who took the time to write a letter or stand up and speak at a school board meeting, the result is an improved school. It creates a better environment for kids and continues to welcome the community with open arms. So I'm so grateful for all the many, many hours of effort, care, and attention that many hundreds of people have put into the result that is before us today. We have a school design that I fully believe we will all love. The focus of the design is not the buildings, but engagement with the natural environment where they will be situated. They will connect our children to the outdoors better than ever before, with usable outdoor play spaces just steps away from their classrooms. It means that now their connection to the outdoors will not be relegated to 15-minute snack breaks or 30-minute recess. They will have outdoor activities woven throughout their school days. I'm confident that the community access and use of the school facility will increase as a result of the redesign, with better playgrounds that can be used in off hours, a new park that's open all day, an ADA accessible walking path along the canyon rim, and a pedestrian connection leading to the entrance to the Torrey Pines Reserve Extension. The school will be comprised of one-story buildings with low roof lines, made possible by creatively relocating utilities. We will also have a safer structure made of non-combustible materials with sprinklers, 4 fire hydrants compared to 0 that are there now, and fire lanes throughout the campus. And all of that is in addition to creating the indoor learning spaces that will enable our teachers to fully engage and prepare the next generation. I appreciate the thorough review and response to the comments on the mitigated negative declaration. I'm hopeful they have resolved any lingering concerns. I certainly feel the document is comprehensive and addressed all the issues that were raised. My vote is to approve the environmental document and build a school that I know the whole community will be proud of, that invites community use, that will support neighborhood property values, and that will be loved by the children and their families for many decades to come. So if there are any more comments, this is the time, and then I'll call for a vote. Okay.
Thanks, Erica. I just wanted to add, I went to Delmar Heights. I grew up on the street of Delmar Heights. I love Delmar Heights, and I'm really excited to see a new Delmar Heights because the one that's standing is the one that I went to, and it hasn't changed other than the addition of the portables. So this is really exciting. Thanks.
Okay, so is there a motion to adopt resolution number 2020-13?
I'll move to adopt.
Erica, you can go ahead. Your area, you go ahead.
I'll move to adopt the resolution.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll
okay.
Second.
And we have a roll call vote. Member Fitzpatrick?
Aye.
Member Mock?
Aye.
Member Raffner?
Aye.
Member Wooden?
Aye.
Member Halpern? Aye. And the motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We are moving to item 4.2, board approval selection of commissioning consultant for Delmar Heights School rebuild project. Chris, is there any background on this?
I would just share that commissioning is a process that the district will need to go through to ensure that the systems that we use in a new project like this, so let me give a little bit of background. Any project over $10 million the school district is building requires a commissioning agent. And so this commissioning agent's job will be to work with district staff, the architects, the engineers, and then the builders to ensure that we are getting the most out of Title 24 and the clean energy that we would expect out of the new energy systems that we're putting in, such as our HVAC and other systems. So this is a requirement for a project this size, but it also will be a benefit to ensure that we're getting the energy savings that we would hope to get with under Title 24.
Okay, any questions? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Doug. Second?
I'll second.
No.
All right, Catherine. So roll call vote. Member Fitzpatrick?
Aye.
Member Mock?
Aye.
Member Raffner?
Aye.
Member Wooden?
Aye.
And aye for me, so the motion has passed. Okay, and now we are changing topics. So 4.3, ratification Delmar Union School District subscription agreement to online platform ThoughtExchange. Can we hear about that?
Sure. So I'll start and I'll let Chris Delahanty add to that because he's done a bulk of the research on ThoughtExchange. But I know one of the priorities of our districts, of our board and of our district staff is to engage our stakeholders in as many ways as we can in an ongoing fashion to get input, to involve stakeholders in a conversation, whether it be a small group, a large group, focus groups. We do lots of surveys. ThoughtExchange allows us one more way to be able to engage with our community in all of those ways. So Chris, if you can add to that, that would be helpful.
Yes, and I think the exciting thing with a product like ThoughtExchange is we are seeing it used more and more with districts across the state and across the country in a way to crowdsource the information from our community. So it provides the community an opportunity under a question or a topic that we may bring up for the community to provide input and ideas. And from that, the community can then go through, and you can either be somebody who might want to provide the input of the idea, or you can rank it on a star scale. And then there is some artificial intelligence in the background that helps us to look at what are the ideas that are coming up from the community, where are they blending together, and will help us to use some of that information. And so then once you've kind of taken that together, it very easily and transparently is shared out with the community so they can look at the ideas that have been brought out, how they've rated, and how they've come together. And so I think it's very exciting when we think about things from the scale of our District Design 2022 and how we might get input on the strategic plan for the districts to focus groups that we might do with staff or with students. It really has a pretty vast ability to use. And so I think that it will be very helpful in our communication, and as we are able to employ it across the district, we will definitely see some benefit and be able to share it back with the board.
And can we use it for these flash surveys like we've been doing? I know one just went out the other day. Is it the same platform that we'd use for that, or is it a different platform?
You may use both, but this would be something where your ThoughtExchange you'll give a question, but the people are going to be able to come up with, here's my idea on how you ask it, here's my thought on it. And then they're going to have the option to either scroll through and rank other people's, so it starts to bring things to the top that are the thoughts that are coming out of the community on that question, or to add their own thoughts to the discussion. And so as you go in, you have an opportunity to either engage with the ideas or to bring your own ideas, or both.
So, Chris, I got a question. So what other softwares are similar to this, and why did you pick ThoughtExchange?
I don't know of one that's very similar to this, and that's why we picked ThoughtExchange. So it takes it beyond just doing a survey, where when we do a survey, we have to come up with all the questions, and then we're just getting data on that question. If we do ThoughtExchange, and even if we do it open-ended, we're going to take it in, and then we're going to have to go through that information and then share it back out with the community. Whereas ThoughtExchange allows the community to come up with the idea, or the answer to the question, and then they're reading those in real time. They're ranking those in real time. So it allows the community to interact with some of those thoughts and ideas without it just having to come through the lens of the district every time. And so I think that is the power in it, because the community gets to come up with some of their responses to some of these open-ended questions and rank it themselves and provide us input that way.
Well, my question really was, what other types of software can do the same thing, and why?
Again, I don't know of another product that does it like this. So most of them, you'll have a Survey Monkey or something like that. We're coming up with the whole survey, whereas this, it's more we come up with the idea and the box, and then people come up with what's in that box.
And how do our parents get access? Is it when we send something out, or can they initiate? I think you said that they can initiate, but how is the subscription handled?
So the subscription would be handled in a manner where we would start with 5 district leaders who would have accounts and be able to create these. And so you'd be creating a ThoughtExchange, is what they call it. And then we would share it out with the community. And then the community would be providing the thoughts and ideas related to that topic that we bring up, and then ranking and scoring and either interacting with the ideas of others or creating their own, or both. And then we'd be able to take that in over a period of time and look at some of the commonalities we're seeing, some of the items that are rising to the top, and it will start to sift into some of the themes that we see, which will be really beneficial in, again, areas like District Design 2022.
So the questions or the topics, for example, might be available on our website, so that anyone in the community can access that and share about it. Is that my understanding?
Well, I think that you would typically open it up for a period of time, somewhat like a survey, but it would be a period of time where we were going to get input on this, and then it would be out, and anybody in the community that you share it with could interact with it.
Okay.
And so it might be District Design 2022, and we are asking a question around the use of collaborative learning spaces. Mm-hmm. And so if we ask the question about that, we would ask the question, but then we get this whole variety of thoughts that would come probably from teachers and from community members and maybe from students. And then we could disaggregate to those different groups, but we could also look at how they had similarities and how they built from there.
That sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I did have a chance to survey some of our area school districts about this. And our former school board member, Kristen Gibson, shared how her experience has been in San Diego. And she says that it's very elegant and provides excellent data. It has a great interface that makes completing the survey very engaging. And you can see how other people are responding in real time. So yeah, a testimonial from one of our own and one of our own districts. Any more questions? Is there a motion to approve ThoughtExchange platform?
I'll move. I'll move.
Okay, I think I heard Scott moving to approve.
I'll second.
Catherine second. Okay, roll call vote. Member Fitzpatrick.
Aye.
Member Mock.
It's got Kristen's stance. I'll go aye.
Member Rathner.
Aye.
Member Wooden.
Aye.
And Member Halpern is aye, so the motion passes. Item 4.4 is board approval to piggyback the Duarte Unified School District bid number 1924 for classroom and office furniture projects. Is there background on that, Chris?
I can talk a little bit about piggyback. When we piggyback on another district's bid, it means that we're actually getting the most cost-effective and best price for a particular project or something that we are going to be purchasing. So Chris, if you want to tell anything more about that, but obviously it's an advantage to the district that another district already has acquired the product at a price that we think is a good price. We can take advantage of piggybacking with them.
Yes, and I can add to that, although I saw Kathy Burks raise her hand, so I've added her to the...
I can't see her, sorry.
That's okay. I just...
There she is, yay!
Hi, good evening. I just add on directly, is just provides the district the opportunity to use pricing in terms of a bid that had gone out through Duarte Unified. It's a great way to access the cost, the work that they did in getting the best prices available. And saves the district time in going through that process. So the fact that they put this bid together in a way that allows other districts to join in was fantastic for many districts to be able to utilize that piggyback bid through Duarte Unified.
Okay, any questions? Is there a motion to approve?
Just one question. So this is the exact type of furniture that you're wanting, though, and so we're not compromising on what we're getting.
Absolutely. When you see, and it's actually expanding our ability to utilize other furniture companies. On this is Verco, which is a company that we have used for many, many years. So we will continue to be able to use that Verco company if it's a type of furniture that we want to look at, but also expanding to another group, Meteor, which we did not have access through our NICSE consortium. It just expands our ability to purchase at better prices with various companies and vendors.
Thanks.
Okay, now is there a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
Thanks, Doug.
I'll second.
Scott, roll call vote. Member Fitzpatrick.
Aye.
Member Mock.
Aye.
Member Raffner.
Aye.
Member Wooden.
Aye.
An aye for me, so the motion is passed. 4.5, Board Approval Resolution Number 2020-14, Notice of Layoff, Classified Employees, Reduction in Workforce due to lack of funds and or lack of work, unrelated to the COVID-19 pandemic. We do have 3 speakers on this, but first, it looks like we have Jason Romero to give us, or maybe Holly, to give us some background.
So these, when we bring forward a resolution such as this, it comes after much thorough analysis by district staff, program need, and obviously our students' needs in our district. So Mr. Romero can give a little background, as well as our Director of Student Services, Jenny Huff. You might be muted, Jason. Sorry.
Let me unmute myself. No, thank you. Good evening, Board President, Ms. Halpern, our governing board members, and Superintendent Dr. McClurg. This agenda item is a proposed layoff resolution regarding one occupational therapist position. The rationale for this recommendation is based on data and the issue of workload. We don't have the work to justify 4 OTs in our district. The Del Mar Union School District is in the midst of declining enrollment. Over the past 4 years, we've had almost 400 students, we've lost almost 400 students and will continue to decline in enrollment. We currently have a 6th grade cohort of over 700 students, which will be leaving, and we'll be rolling up a kindergarten cohort of a class of 500. With those numbers, our district, which was 4,500 students just a few short years ago, will now be under 4,000 students. Through that decline in enrollment, we've seen a loss of K-6 sections. So in 2016-17, we had 191 K-6 sections, and each year we've lost 2 to 4 sections, getting us to the 179 sections we have this year and 176 sections next year. So in 5 years, we would have lost 15 teachers. With our class sections being less, we've also had a decline in the number of students we're averaging in each class. And I want to make that point really clear, because in some districts, they start losing teachers because they're increasing the class sizes. And what that does is it saves budget, right? So we've lost students, but we haven't even kept up with the number of teachers we could be reducing by. Our class sizes have actually gone down over the last 4 years. Over the last 4 years, we've lost 12 teaching positions. Next year, it will be 3 more. And we haven't had to bring layoffs to the board because we've had attrition at those positions. So from resignations to retirements to promotions, we've not had the need to lay off staff. Similarly, in our STEAM Plus teachers, which we've had less sections, so we've needed less STEAM Plus, we've also been able to reduce through attrition. We've also had a dramatic reduction in the number of instructional aides that we've needed. Over the past 4 years, we've lost around 20 instructional aide positions. And like K-6 teaching positions, we've lost those staff through attrition, retirements, and resignations. We've also had in the past 2 assistant principals, but because we have less enrollment and less need for assistant principals, we've lost an assistant principal position based on the reduction. So the position we are recommending today is to lay off strictly based on the data and the needs of the district. We've carefully looked at the needs of the department and the needs of the district, and based on the recommendation from our Director of Student Services, we don't have enough work to justify 4 OTs in our district. So with careful consideration and based on the needs going forward, data strongly doesn't support the need for 4 OTs. And the only reason we haven't had to reduce the OT load is the attrition issue as well. So Jenny, can you speak to the data supporting your recommendation?
I don't see her in the other she is. Okay.
Hi. Yes, like Jason and Holly both said, the decision to reduce the position is really based entirely on the needs of our students and the services that we're providing. So based on the number of students that we have currently and projecting for next year that require OT services, we just do not have enough students and enough work to warrant for occupational therapists. So if you look at occupational therapist caseloads, or the number of students that they serve throughout California and even in our neighboring districts, the caseload is typically anywhere between 50, 60, even 70 students that an occupational therapist would provide service to. And our caseloads are far, far below that. And looking at the needs of all of our students across the district, we just can't warrant for occupational therapists. We're looking for next year, even with only 3 and reducing by 1 position, we're looking at our therapists carrying a caseload of low 40s. And even with that, we're very confident that we can continue to provide quality services to our students and meet their needs with 3 occupational therapists.
And this situation isn't one that you know is taken lightly. I mean, we don't compare ourselves to other districts. We never have. But when our neighboring districts, you know, have half the OTs that we have, and are servicing more students. You know, San Diego, 13,000 plus students and 2 occupational therapists. It speaks to the needs that we have. And so the district does have needs, the department does have needs, and we're addressing those needs. It's just unfortunate that we don't have a need for a 4th occupational therapist.
I mean, I have a lot of questions. So Jenny, if you could just dial us in on the numbers a little bit better. For example, this year, what is our ratio of occupational therapists to students? And what is your projection for next year if we don't make this reduction?
Well, like I said, and what Jason referred to, if you look at our neighboring districts, some of our larger districts are carrying 1 OT per 3,000 students enrolled. So with our numbers and 4 OTs, like I said, our caseloads are far below that. Right now, looking at our projections for next year, we have students receiving direct services, so working directly with an occupational therapist weekly, and then others just receiving services through a consultative model. And we're looking at about 120 students receiving direct services. So again, with 3 occupational therapists and caseloads in the low 40s, that's ample, should be ample staff to provide quality OT services that we need. And when we're looking at our budgeting and trying to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students and providing different services throughout the district for all needs for students with disabilities, if we're overstaffed in one area, it will impact our ability to provide quality services in another area. So it's very important that we're ensuring that we have appropriate staffing to meet the needs of all of our students with disabilities.
And I think you said you expect 120 kids next year. What is the number of kids this year that are getting OT help?
Right now we have about 145, but like I said, many of those are consultative, receiving consultation services only.
We have 117 on IEPs, and with a lot of times with a larger cohort of 6th graders leaving and kindergarten, a smaller cohort coming in, it's safe to say that we're going to have less need next year going forward, even using forward thinking and thinking that we're going to have to do makeup sessions or things like that. We have the staff with 3 OTs to be able to address all of those needs.
Okay, I think you just told me that there's 117 kids now who have IEPs that have for OT, and next year will have 120.
No, those are students receiving direct services. Yes.
Right. So we have some students that are in consult, and so if we move some of those consults, if we lose some students, and then we have some of those consults that we actually put on an IEP, then we're anticipating on the high side 120. From
117 this year.
Right. So we're using whenever we're making projections, we're assuming high end. So we would hate to say like, okay, like we're losing 200 students and we're going to see the current trend to have less. We're projecting on the high side just to be safe, and even on the high side of 120 students is still 40 to 1 OT.
Okay, but so this year you have 117 cases with 4, and next year you'll have 120 cases with your asking for 3. And in addition, in both those years, there are also the consultative cases that you mentioned. Is that correct?
Yes. Like I said, the 120 that we're discussing are direct consult services. The additional students are consulting with a classroom teacher, more or less. They're not direct services on a weekly basis.
Shiwa, do you have a question?
Yes. Can you explain the type of work that they do? And because you mentioned that the San Diego district uses less. I'm just wondering, maybe is it elementary school? Do they do different things, or what kind of? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yes, preschool. Because we serve students from preschool to 6th grade, we do have different needs than students who would be served in a secondary district. However, it wouldn't be a ratio difference like what we're seeing. So we have, our students have different needs, but they don't have additional needs. And in order to qualify to receive occupational therapy services, it has to be a fine motor or sensory disorder related to a disability.
Right, and I brought up the point of San Diego, just to talk about our local neighbor. Solana Beach has 2 OTs. Similar sized school districts, such as Lemon Grove have 1.6, and they're 4,000 students, very similar size to us. San Isidro has 1 occupational therapist, 5,000 students, 1 occupational therapist, 1 aide. But then we don't want to be like other districts. We have our unique needs, and we feel that it's an exceptional program, and it is going to continue to be an exceptional program. The program that we run is dramatically different than those school districts. So we can dig deep into that data, but really the idea behind this is we don't have enough work to support 4 OTs. Even in an exceptional program that we're running, we have enough work for 3 OTs, and that's going to be the recommendation. Anytime that the district is bringing a layoff notice to the board, it's not without careful consideration, because we know the impact that it's going to have on some of our most needy students. And so we strongly believe that this is the recommendation that is best going to serve students. We don't want students receiving OT services that don't qualify for OT. We strongly believe in making sure that the students that qualify for those services are the students that are receiving those services. And that's the plan that we have going forward. The plan that we have going forward is creating an exceptional program for our students that qualify for occupational therapist services by highly qualified occupational therapists.
I have more questions, but I also want to make sure we have time for public comment. So I don't know, should we just do that first and then come back to more questions, Jiwa?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we have 3 speakers, and we'll do it in the order of David Skinner, then Cindy Monahan, then Teresa Reuter. So David Skinner's in the call. So go ahead, David.
Good evening. Thanks for letting me speak tonight, President Halpern and members of the board. My name is David Skinner. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Del Mar, California Teachers Association as their president. And I urge you to oppose this resolution. There are other speakers that are going to be speaking about Bree, it's her name specifically, and the need not to reduce the services at this time, and some answers to some of the things that were brought up. We also have several teachers in attendance still this evening that brought signs and made backgrounds, but unfortunately you can't see them. So I want to assure you that they're there. They wanted to express their concern over this issue. My comments are about the timing of this decision and about the harmful effects that the termination of one of our unit members would have on all of our bargaining unit, and the possible damage that it will do to relations with the district. I sent each one of you information regarding the background of our occupational therapists and how they came to be included in DMCTA. Just to summarize though, in October of 2019, these 4 asked to be the DMCTA to represent them as their exclusive representative. We petitioned the California Public Employee Relations Board at that time, and PERB agreed with us in December. In December, as of December, we considered those people to be part of our bargaining unit. We asked the district to begin negotiations to have the final details of our modifications to our contract and make that final. For various reasons, we haven't been able to complete those negotiations, and that was the reason for the first item on the agenda tonight. Board policy 4140 states that the governing board recognizes the right of district employees to form bargaining units, select employee organizations as their exclusive representative, and also it says that the district shall not impose, threaten, or impose reprisals on employees, discriminate or threaten to discriminate, or otherwise interfere because of an employee's relationship or membership in an employee organization. We believe that the decision to terminate Bree at this time can only be seen as a reprisal. It's hard for us to see it any other way. I urge you to oppose this and to protect yourself from the appearance of violating your own policy, as well as fair labor practices. The savings of $118,000 are not worth that. Also, I need to let you know that we are working with CTA to find out what other recourse we might have to protect our member. I urge you to oppose this resolution and to keep Bree in the district and to keep relations with our bargaining unit positive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have Cindy in the call. Go ahead.
Good evening, Superintendent McClurg, President Halpern, and Governing Board. Thank you for your time and endurance on this long evening. My name is Cindy Monahan. I am a speech language pathologist for the district and sit on the DMCTA Executive Board. In response to 4.5, the reduction in force due to lack of work, I would like to pose two questions. The occupational therapists in our district do not have a defined class or caseload size. There is no job description. Without a class size, off of what measure did the district determine lack of work? My second question is this. Considering statistics, typically historical trends are a valuable source from which to make staffing decisions. With this, could the lower numbers of students specifically requiring occupational therapy in the 2019-20 calendar year be an outlier? So with these questions, I encourage the board not to act in haste and to provide thoughtful consideration to the district's proposed recommendation to reduce the district's occupational therapy workforce by 25%. Thank you for considering my questions.
Thank you. And then Teresa Reuter.
Hi. Hi, Dr. McClurg, President Halpern, and the Governing Board. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's been a long evening. My name is Teresa Reuter, and I'm an occupational therapist with the district. I would just like to make a few comments regarding 4.5. First of all, there's been no negotiated contract language that's been developed this year to describe our duties and responsibilities. It is problematic for us that we do not currently have a job description, and we're confused as to how not enough work was determined. Without knowing what our job entails, how can it be measured what is and is not needed across 8 K-6 sites and 1 preschool? Additionally, once Pacific Highlands Ranch is built, we will have 9 K-6 sites as well as preschool. That would be 10 sites for 3 occupational therapists. And we have to consider the travel time and that would take on our daily workload. How could this possibly meet the needs of our special education students as well as the general education teachers and classrooms? Our role is to serve all children and to educate general education teachers within the classroom. If we are spread too thin, we simply cannot educate our student teachers and parents appropriately. I did hear a lot of comments about comparing to other districts, and while that might be true, that numbers could reflect being low, we just don't have a baseline to compare that to. And another point I'd like to make is that oftentimes therapists are put in a position in school districts, specifically OTs and PTs, where caseload is often the number that is talked about. However, we would urge you to consider a workload model, which identifies all of the things that are required for us to be able to do our job well and appropriately for all of our students. So the workload model would include travel, amongst other things, and we just haven't had the opportunity to negotiate this with the district. So we fail to see how a cut in this position could be determined if we yet haven't defined the description as well as what our actual workload is. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go back to discussion. Let me give everybody a chance here to ask questions.
I have a question. Why now?
Why now or for the layoff? This is the time of year that we normally bring layoffs to the board. So since the OTs are classified unit members, they are on a different layoff timeline than certificated unit members. Certificated unit members have a March 15th notice. Classified employees have a 60-day layoff notice. So the district evaluates its needs at the end of the year annually, and this was one of the positions that the Director of Student Services was looking at this year. And so we actually had talked about this with the union a few weeks ago. And just a point of clarification, in December when the union wrote to PERB asking for the OTs to be part of the DMCTA, it was left out by David Skinner that the district agreed. We did not object to them being part of that. So it sounds like, they were, proposing this and we were objecting. We didn't object. We submitted our letter saying we do not object to them being part of the, the teachers union. And at that time, we didn't go forward with our 60-day layoff. So we could have done layoffs at that time if this was in retaliation or in retribution for this action. It's based solely on data. And yes, one of the things that if you look on, the Association for Occupational Therapists website, they advocate to talk about caseload. I would advocate for the same thing, for workload, excuse me. I would advocate for the same thing. The union has proposed actually creating, part of their initial proposal to the district was creating a cap for occupational therapists. The cap they're recommending is 54. That's what they suggested. We're not even suggesting that we go to that. Our recommendation, is to look just like Teresa talked about, which is workload, not caseload for occupational therapists.
So what would happen? I don't know what's going to happen with the COVID closures and everything. I don't know if school's going to go back into session this semester now, or whether it's going to go back into session in the fall. But if this is delayed until the fall, wouldn't we have a better idea of our enrollment? Wouldn't we have a better idea of what we're dealing with?
No, we have one of the great things about the Del Mar Union School District is our enrollment is super predictable. So we know how many students that we're going to have based on our kindergarten enrollment. And we have a cohort survival rate like no other district in the county. We basically have a 103% cohort survival rate. So when students enroll in kindergarten, there's a 103% chance that they're going to finish off as sixth graders, which means that our enrollment's predictable. So just like everything else in any type of data that you want to look at, we know with relative certainty how many special ed students we're going to have, how many students are going to be on our occupational therapist caseloads, and that's important. So yes, we are looking at workload, and moving an occupational therapist from 2 school sites to 3 isn't going to dramatically create workload difficulties as far as it relates to travel. So when an occupational therapist is serving 8 schools, like some are servicing in our neighboring school districts, like that definitely is something to consider. But working with schedules and ensuring that we have set schedules for our occupational therapists and they're going to be at certain schools at certain times allow us to make sure that we mitigate those issues with travel. And so, that's going to be, the average. So when we do have a 9th school open in a couple of years, that means that, for all intents and purposes, we'll have 3 occupational therapists. They'll be assigned to 3 school sites, maybe. But we also have times where there's school sites, such as some of our school sites that serve a bigger need for occupational therapists, that maybe that occupational therapist is only at 2 school sites, because we're able to address the needs of that single school site and address the needs of other school sites accordingly. So it really, this plan is the best plan for the district going forward. It allows us to use our resources, to serve the students that need the resources and make sure that we have work for our people. There's nothing healthy about a work environment where there's not enough work for the people.
But there's no school now, and we're not sure if there's going to be school in the fall or when school is going to start in the fall. I guess the question again is, why not wait until then? What is the effect of doing that?
So the effect of doing that is you're just kicking the can down the road. We're not going to have more students in September. There will be less students this September than there were last September. So that means there's going to be less students requiring every single service that we have in the district. So it's a simple data question, and it just can't be supported on let's see what happens. Like that's a fallacy that doesn't work in HR, because what we're dealing with here is predictability. Like we have a strong predictability, which is why I talked about the cohort survival rate that is unparalleled to any district in this county. And doing so, we're committing ourselves to being overstaffed in this area where we haven't done it in the past. We've reduced teachers when we don't need teachers. We've reduced aides when we don't need aides. We've reduced assistant principals when we don't need assistant principals. Like and you know, one of the commenters today mentioned the employee. It's unfortunate, you know, that we mentioned that, because it's not about the employee, it's about the position. We make decisions that are based on the needs of the district and the needs of our students, not related to that person. And so, yes, it's unfortunate that this person, you know, is the lowest seniority and is that one that we, you know, we're releasing, but that's the way it works in California. You know, EERA and PERB set guidelines for how we reduce the number of staff, and we reduced it based on seniority.
On that topic, Jason, I know that that Bree has been with the district at least as long as I've been here. So can you explain the seniority of all the 4 occupational therapists? And
yeah, so yeah, great. And Bree was with the district for many years. About 4 years ago, she left to Poway, and she's been working in Poway for, it was, you know, 37 months, you know, is how it worked out. So when she returned to the district this year, her seniority reset. So Bree, who had been with the district for a while, had that 37-month separation. Her seniority date reset, and so, you know, we looked at that and we wanted to make sure we consulted with an attorney to make sure that you know, we were reading ed code correctly and ensuring that we notified the correct person. And in this situation, it was Bree who was the lowest in seniority.
Here's my struggle with this, is that my understanding, one, is that there's been 4 positions since 2011. And then as of last year, I mean, you were indicating that you rehired her. So if we're talking about enrollment being declined, I mean, why did we rehire her if in fact we could just left the position?
So in 2000,
we could close the position last year. Why hire? And then at this point, now we have to lay off within 1 year.
It's a great question. And so, you know, in 2011, we were at 199 sections of teachers. We're now at 176. So we've lost in that same time period 199, 23 teachers. So, you know, we can't take 2011 and say like, okay, you know, 4 years, you know, we haven't lost anyone. What we really looked at was when our program of student services and looked at the needs of that department this year. So we had tried to do what's called maintenance of effort. So in special education law, there is a requirement that the district spend the same amount of money on student services year after year, that there's not a dip in the services we're providing to our neediest students. So over the years, we've had to maintain the maintenance of effort law. So this year, though, we just haven't had the ability to justify that. So we're losing a couple special ed teachers. We're losing, you know, the occupational therapists, and we had some reduction in aides, all of which, you know, are important positions in our district. And if we had to work for them, you know, as a past special educator, I actually am an assistive technology specialist, which fall under occupational therapist. Like I'm an advocate for these people. Like we're an advocate for these students, and we're advocate for these teachers. We just don't have to work. And so during that close, Jiwal, you had a great question. During that close look at this department, and, you know, trying to look at the needs and trying to conform to the maintenance of effort and guidelines established by our government, you know, that was one of the reasons why we held off on some of these decisions related to special ed students.
And if I could follow up on that, just some of the questions that I've heard about how we determined the caseload, or how did we determine the numbers, we really looked very closely at our students' IEPs, and we examined how many students are actually receiving direct services, how many students have weekly service. We really examined the data and looked specifically at our students' needs this year and what our needs will be next year. And we, based on those numbers and that data, With our current enrollment and the enrollment that we're proposing for next year, we just do not have we can't justify for occupational therapists. And like I believe Cindy mentioned about the caseload, the state of California does not have a caseload cap for occupational therapists like they do for speech pathologists. Speech pathologists have a caseload that is driven by EdCode. There is not one for occupational therapists. However, the trend typically is anywhere around 60, an average of 60 students. And if we were to maintain 4 occupational therapists next year, our occupational therapists would have an average of 33 students. So it is just a sheer matter of need and the number of therapists that we require to provide the services that our students needs.
You have a question?
I have a question just about time. How much time per student with an IEP, or does it vary depending on the IEP, how much time a student receives services from an occupational therapist each week?
That's determined by the IEP team, and so it varies depending on the needs of the student.
And do occupational therapists always work one-on-one with students, or do they ever work in small groups with students?
No, they can work in small groups. They can go into a classroom and address the needs of several students at a time. They can work with a motor lab with an adaptive PE teacher. Yes, they have the capability of seeing multiple students at one time.
Right, and one of the things with our occupational therapists, they're not case managers for IEPs. Like, you can't qualify for special education through occupational therapist needs. So like our speech therapist, you can qualify for special ed services, because you have a speech need, or a learning need, or anything. An occupational therapist is an additional service. So it can't be a reason why a child qualifies for special education.
Can you describe consultative services? Sorry, go ahead, Jenny, and I'll.
So I was just going to say that speaks to the question of workload versus caseload. Is a speech pathologist who is maintaining a caseload of 55 also is a case manager and is responsible for all aspects of maintaining an IEP, contacting parents, working through the dates, scheduling, whereas an occupational therapist is a related service and is not a case manager. So that workload is reduced in comparison to someone who is case managing. And like I said, our case managers, our speech pathologists are carrying caseloads of 54, 55, and our OTs are in the low 30s.
Are the occupational therapists required to stay throughout the entire IEP meeting?
Yes. All IEP team members are required to stay for the entire IEP team.
Would that be built into the job description as far as the time that takes throughout their week or month?
Yes, that is an expectation for all of our special education staff, and it is built into the scheduling for any staff member who's attending IEP team meetings.
Can you describe, beyond the students? I'm sorry, Scott. You keep trying to talk.
Go ahead.
Okay, we'll get to you. For the students who benefit from what you're calling the consultative services, can you describe what that is? And we've received many letters from on this topic in the last couple of days, and so some regular classroom teachers, for example, have described how the OT supports their work at the classroom. And as you think about the way that our instruction is changing and the kinds of work that OTs do, can you describe, I guess, both what are the consultative services, and then how do you work with classroom teachers to just support their work?
So typically a student, like Jason said, occupational therapy is a related service that a student is eligible for if they have a disability and they receive occupational therapy as a service related to that disability. It's not an intervention or a remediation or support for students in general ed. So it is typically supporting a student with a disability. So for a consultation, typically we would see a student receiving consultation if they were ready to be exited from services. So they no longer require the level of direct intervention. They no longer require one-on-one therapy where they're pulled out of their classroom to work specifically and directly with the occupational therapist. It's more of a service where the occupational therapist may be consulting with the teacher about seating or about sensory breaks or about activities, sensory diets to help a student focus. It's no longer one-on-one direct services.
So I have a question. Oh, Scott, I'm sorry, it's your turn.
Well, you guys have been asking pretty much the same questions I was going to ask, especially with Erica just asked about the consultation, and I was going to follow up on that a little bit. So it sounds like those consultations, especially conversing with teachers, and that's where we had a lot of letters come in about they need the occupational therapist because they talk to them. Certainly with what we've been doing recently over the last 2 months now with the online stuff, is that a area where the occupational therapists are able to be more efficient at conversing with teachers, going through a Zoom session or talking with them like that?
Well, again, the role of the occupational therapist is to provide services for a student who qualifies for a disability. So
I was asking more on, if a teacher wants to talk to them or something like that.
There will still be ample, I believe there will be ample occupational therapists to be able to talk to teachers who have questions. But again, the service that an occupational therapist is providing is funded through special ed funding, and it is for students with IEPs. So it is not appropriate for our occupational therapists to be just advising or providing, like I said, remedial services to students in general education.
That's a really good point. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act really speaks clearly about putting the cart before the horse. They are strong proponents of not providing special ed services for students that aren't on IEPs. You're putting the cart before the horse, and you're really taking away the IEP process from the IEP team. So, if a teacher consults on, hey, I have a student in my kindergarten class that, has issues gripping the pencil, well, have you tried this pencil grip? That's something different. But if an occupational therapist is literally going into classrooms and working alongside the teacher doing a lesson, I believe that's a violation of IDEA. And we're not providing the special ed services to the special ed students. So clearly states in IDEA, don't put the cart before the horse, don't provide special ed related services to students that don't have IEPs.
So are they doing a lot of this consultation because they do not have enough work then?
Yes.
Okay, well, on the consultation topic, and Juwa, you were asking, what the OTs do. I can speak from my own experience that, that my own daughter benefited from one of those consultation services, and it made like a huge, tremendous difference for her. And she did have a 504, but she didn't have an IEP. And that also wasn't identified until kindergarten. So to me, it's impossible to know, going into next year, what the needs might be of those students. And it just concerns me going from like a 2-to-1 ratio of schools to OTs to what will soon be a 3-to-1 ratio. It just doesn't sit right. It seems like we're going to end up eroding what is to me one of the strengths of our district, is that we are able to meet all these kids where they are and where they need help, even if they don't have a huge comprehensive IEP plan, and get them on track so that they all do great over time.
Yeah, I would disagree. I would strongly suggest that we do have the ability to reach our students' needs through 3 OTs. We're not about providing anything but an excellent program. And so we're going to make sure that all the students' needs are met in the manner in which they've been previously serviced. and ensuring that our staff is able to do the amazing work that they've done in the past.
Did I hear correctly that she's funded through special ed?
Yes.
Yes, occupational therapists are funded through special education.
So that's not out of the general fund.
No.
And then
other than wait, real quick, but our special education fund does encroach on the general fund.
Yes.
So,
understood, but it's not typical in our dealings with teachers and whatnot. It's not similar to that type of setting. This is a unique situation because it comes out of special ed.
Yes, according to state and federal laws, special ed funding can only pay for special ed services.
And then she's apparently been around this district for quite some time. She came back to us last year, and then what we're looking at is next year's approximations. And having been on the board, riding these roller coasters with you and your predecessors, Jason, that the enrollments go up and down. Are we playing whack-a-mole here and gonna let her go now and hire somebody the year after, and then all of a sudden we don't have somebody that's consistent?
And it's a great district to work for. I have no crystal ball in telling you what the enrollment is going to look like. But I do have historical data that is showing what the trend is. So, we use empirical data that looks at, all the houses that are being built. And in Pacific Highlands Ranch, where we're having growth, the anticipated cohorts that are coming, the unit production rate in Pacific Highlands Ranch is not at the high number that we estimated it to be. So we always remember when we talked about this, Scott, years ago, when we were talking about ensuring that we had space at our school sites. We didn't want to go down the route of making these decisions and then run out of room. And I remember a previous consultant of ours talking about, well, we kind of scrubbed the numbers. Remember, Scott? They were talking about scrubbing the numbers, and we were saying, we're scrubbing the numbers on the high side. And really what we're recognizing is even if we still scrub those occupational therapist numbers, we're still going to have enough work for 3 OTs. And that's what the recommendation is based on. It's only based on that. It's not, honestly, it's sad that it's we had to mention the employee's name. I have heard nothing but amazing things about that employee. But we can't make decisions, just like the teachers that we haven't called back. We're not making decisions based on that person. Like when we start doing that, we start making emotional decisions, we're going down a slippery slope. The district is invested in, one of the things that David Skinner talked about was he would hate that this would maybe, interfere with relations as it relates to the union. Me too. I mean, this is a person, David Skinner is a person that I talk to on a regular basis. I mean, we text, we talk, the last thing I want is for one position to ruin, those relations. I don't believe it will, because we're coming at this authentically. We're coming at this as, presenting a resolution to the board, and we're hoping for support because it aligns with what's happening, what's the trend, where the need is. There's a need in our special education department. If I told Jenny Huck, here's $1 million, this is, tell me what your needs are, I guarantee you that she's not going to recommend an additional occupational therapist. She's not going to recommend that 4th therapist, because I've talked to her about what her needs are in her department. And so, we're tasked with a finite amount of money, and we're tasked with making an exceptional program. And the finite amount of money has to meet the needs of our exceptional program. When it doesn't, regardless of who it is, we can't make decisions based on emotion. When we start doing that, it's really a slippery slope of giving into our heart and not really using data to support these decisions.
Well, I don't want you to believe that I'm making any kind of emotional decision here. That's not what I'm doing. Having kids that have had IEPs myself, and I know that our district doesn't just want to meet the needs of these kids. We want to exceed the needs of these kids. And so I think your assessment that if you asked Jenny if she'd want a 4th occupational therapist, she would. She has a 4th, so it's not a correct question to ask, because she already has that 4th. If she had a 3rd and you said, do you want a 4th? Well, that would be something different. But right now she has a 4th. So she's not going to ask for it necessarily. But another thing that I wanted to bring up is your assessments, your trends. They deal with new homes, people that move into those homes, but they don't deal with people that have special needs and how you can differentiate anybody in those groups of people that might have a need for an OT in the future. And my concern is we have somebody in that position that's been in that position for quite some time. She's proven herself, obviously, because she came back to the district and we took her back. And if we're going to choose to let her go simply because next year's needs, which we don't know, frankly, we just know the numbers. We don't know how many of those new people have a need for an occupational therapist. We just know what those numbers are. I think we're acting kind of blindly in that way. And so having somebody with a history is better than having to look for somebody without a history in 2 years. That's just my thought.
And I understand those concerns, but in the world of special education, we really review staffing needs annually, and we do it based on number of students who require a service and caseloads. So our educational specialists who provide services to students in learning centers or special day or learning centers or learning labs have a caseload of 28. That is a state caseload that is mandated and recommended. And there's a similar for speech pathology. So we're looking at those caseloads and those numbers when we're determining students' needs and how to staff. So being overstaffed at a position, like I said, is taking funding away from our ability to provide service somewhere else. And so we're looking at how many people do we need to provide this service. And the bottom line is we do not need 4 occupational therapists to provide the services to the number of students that we have. And taking into consideration everything that you said, Erica and Doug, specifically about making sure that we have the staff available to meet any new students that are being identified. We have built that in when we're looking at the numbers. We're not taking them up to the maximum caseload. We're building that in, and we're assuming some growth, and we're still far below what is a typical caseload for an occupational therapist in California.
Can I bring in? It sounds like you're actually closer to 2 is what you're needing by what your numbers are than you are to 4. To 4. I mean, 3 you're still overstaffed is what I'm hearing from your numbers. That you're still, in fact, you could probably deal with 2 and still be okay on occupational therapists. So, from what I'm hearing from you guys in terms of your numbers, that you have plenty of room in here for additional caseloads, even if it were to expand tomorrow.
Yes, with 3 occupational therapists, I'm confident that we have room for their caseloads to grow and for them to meet the needs of our students.
Scott, you honestly just mentioned a conversation that we've already had. We really talked about that there is a need for 2 occupational therapists, and we can still do, and we'll do an amazing job, providing amazing services, provide all the consultation we need with 3. But Jenny and myself have had conversations, and members of cabinet, that their need in our district, honestly, is for 2.
And Eric was talking about 3 schools. I don't think it's a school number. I mean, our schools they're so close. Driving time and getting from one school to another is not an issue, and you're probably there for one day anyway, even if you were having to go from one school to another. It's one school today, another school another day, sort of like what our STEAM Plus teachers might do. So I don't think that's the real issue. Driving time is not an issue with that. Is looking at caseload. It looks like even you're going to be even with 3, you still have lots of room for caseloads. Is what I'm hearing in the numbers. So I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned that you would have a surge. I mean, I think your guys' numbers are a lot better than the COVID model numbers that are going out there. But
And I'd like to clarify, that's an excellent point, Scott, is that we don't have occupational therapists assigned to school sites. So we don't say this occupational therapist serves this school. Our occupational therapists are assigned based on our number of students that have a need. So we may have one school that has a significant caseload and another school that has none. So we don't have designated OTs for each site based on a day of the week or a schedule that like that. It is 100% scheduled according to the needs of the students. And we're just looking at numbers, and we're looking at where those students are. So if we have more of a need at one school, we have more staff there. And if we have less, then we have less at that site.
I guess the issue that I'm struggling with here is last year we had enough for 4 OTs. What changed? If we had I know that the trends can be viewed years down the road, and they're not very different than reality if we look down the road a couple of years. What changed?
We probably, you know what, Doug, we have not done a layoff. And so as we look to see, you know, are we going to have increased growth as Jason was talking about or not? It has shown us that year after year we're not experiencing that, and so we continue to have, you know, pretty predictable caseloads. And I do want to, you know, be very complimentary actually of our special education department for doing a very thorough analysis of the needs of the children in our district as it pertains to the employees that we have and the services that they require. And they're very, very thoughtful. Jenny Ha and Nadine Schick are very thoughtful, and they've been really analyzing for months and have done a very fine job of that. And it is about numbers when we look at that, and that is sometimes very hard in a district. And having done this for a very long time, I understand it, and I've experienced it before. And we need to make sure that we're applying our resources where our children need them applied. And as Jenny was saying, it is true. If we are spending money on something that is not what our children need, that is not being responsible and responsive to our children. So I do want to say that I do believe that Jenny and Nadine have done a really very fine job, along with Shelley Peterson and everybody looking at the entire educational program and what our students need and the staffing that we need.
I guess the question, I know GY asked why this year, and really I think the question is why not last year then in terms of doing that layoff. But maybe you can address more. I know you were talking about level of funding. Was that a reason why we didn't bring it last year?
Yeah, and I think one of the level of funding, maintenance of effort is what it's referred to. It was definitely something that we took into consideration whenever we talk about special ed positions. I mean, districts routinely go through this practice when they're in declining enrollment. The minute you reduce the number of dollars you're spending, that now puts your dollars that you get at a different level next year. So it's a penalty, really, dollar for dollar penalty for doing that. But when we have a situation where our special education budget is impacting our general fund, that's important for us. We can't continue to maintain overspending because it does start affecting, Doug, our general fund. So that is one reason. There was also just a strong look this year at our special education department. You know, Jenny Ha and Nadine Schick really took the time and effort to look at every position and how we can, you know, make sure that we're best meeting the students' needs. So when you do a deep dive into a district, you look at caseloads, you look at services, you look at workload, you look at, you know, what the staff is doing, and that's where the proposal came from. It came from really them noting that we were really overstaffed in this position, and significantly overstaffed in this position, and there was a strong need to address it through layoff.
I guess 2 comments. One is that it's really unusual to hear us compared to Lemon Grove as kind of a target number or a number we should be comparing ourselves against. I think that's kind of a surprising comparison. And the other thing is that I think we have an amazing staff. I'm sure you guys have done a thorough analysis, but unfortunately the numbers that you're showing us here are flat. So I'm not convinced that I'm happy to make a decision based on data. The data that are sharing with us just doesn't convince me, but there are others may be fine with it. So.
Yeah, and just to I'll just the Lemon Grove thing. Lemon Grove is a district that's similar size that we always compare ourselves to. So in the past, when I brought data related to similar size school districts, Lemon Grove is one of the districts that we have. So our data points that we have 2 data points that we use. We use a basic aid district and similar size school district. Lemon Grove is one of the data points that we share when we're doing our negotiation budgetary updates. It's also one of the districts that we share with the union when comparing similar size school districts.
Maybe you can address, Jason, since Erica is concerned about being flat, because it looks like you've been overstaffed for a while on here. And what was it 5 years ago, in terms of that, in terms of the numbers on caseloads?
Yeah, I don't have the data from 5 years ago. It's one of the things that, as we look at staffing, it's really a decision that's based on the supervisor, the director's recommendation. And so in this case, what we were really looking at is the needs of the department. So 5 years ago, I believe there were 4 OTs. I can say there are less students on IEPs than there were 5 years ago. There's less students in our district than there were 5 years ago. There's less instructional aides. There's less teachers. So, I can tell you that all the data points have shown we've reduced, those positions where there's student-centered positions than we have. So there's times like we can't reduce like the number of let's just say office assistants we have. So an admin assistant, every school site needs an admin assistant, whether the school site has 400 students or whether it has 800 students. But you don't need the same amount of teachers for 400 students as you do for 800 students. That's where the data comes in, and that's the data that we're talking about. There's been a reduction of the number of students on IEPs. There's going to be a reduction again next year, just because kindergarten, and I get that people are saying it's flat. It's not flat. We're scrubbing the numbers to make sure that we have enough space to ensure that 3 OTs are busy, okay, that they're working. So what happens is we have to talk about what if all of these consultation students, what if more kids than normal qualify for OT services? Then that's where we get that number of 120. It's not flat. We're going to have less kindergarten students. We're going to lose a high cohort of 700 6th grade students. If we kick the can down the road next year, we're going to be bringing this again, because I am going to guarantee you 100% today that we're going to have less kindergarten students. The Jenny Hub, what is the highest grade level that we qualify students in for special needs, students with special needs?
6th grade.
Right. So at that point, okay, we're losing the highest cohort of 6th graders. The initial IEPs will be in kindergarten. So we're going to lose a high number, and we're going to have a smaller number of kindergarten students that are qualifying. So it's just history of doing this for 11 years is going to tell me that it's not flat. It's actually declining, but we're going to be careful. And so when we share a number of 120, we're just being careful that even on the high side, we're going to have enough work for 3 OTs.
What was it 2 years ago then?
Scott, I can actually answer your question about 5 years ago. We do have some data from 2016 with OT caseloads at the time. We don't have all 4 of the caseloads, but we have a reflection of 3 of our occupational therapists in 2016, and they were carrying caseloads in the 50s. So now we have the same number of occupational therapists, and they're carrying caseloads in the 30s. So among our 4 occupational therapists, we've seen a significant reduction in the number of students that they're serving individually.
Which brings you back, you're closer to 2 than you are 4. And this should have probably been done last year. But it was the maintenance of funding piece that prevented that from happening last year.
Can you tell me what those numbers look like over time then? Like if you said 55 years ago, what does it look like? 4 years, 3 years, 2 years?
I don't have that. That's what we have, caseload logs that we were able to pull, but we don't have the documented data year after year. That's something that we will be looking at going forward.
I have, I have similar concerns as with Erica and Doug. I asked the question, why don't we just punt it down the road? You know, you can kind of say a little bit like what Jason said, and you know, if it is in fact the same, you know, bring it back. Let me know if the trend continues. But what I can't fathom or understand is why you hire somebody this past year if you're telling me the trend has been consistently going down. That's what I struggle with. You know,
we didn't look at it last year. You know, it was one of the things, and I can own that. You know, when you're staffing 700 employees, you know, it wasn't an area that I reached out to the special ed director and said, you know, what is the need of the department right now? You know, how is that? And that was one of the things that Jenny Hutt and Nadine addressed this year. You know, I can own the fact that it's going to be a better practice in HR working with managers, because we do routinely respond to when there's a need. When there's a need, the directors are the ones that are making a recommendation. Like I'm not saying like, oh, we need an additional nighttime custodian, right? It's Mike Gallis that's coming to us and saying, hey, you know what, this school is having, you know, they have these new floors, and these new floors are taking a long time to clean, and all these wipeable surfaces. You know, there's a lot more surfaces that we need an additional nighttime custodian. And so that's been the process. And the process we didn't have in the past, which was our special ed director didn't come to us with like how many, you know, OTs they had and they were overstaffed. Nadine and Jenny really looked at that this year. And so it was one of the things that they brought up, you know, and doing so, it's HR's responsibility to address it. And so, you know, if there was a misstep and why we didn't do it last year, like I own that.
Okay, are there additional questions? Okay, so is there a motion to approve resolution number 2020-14?
I'll move to approve the resolution.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, if there's no second, the motion fails. Okay, seeing none, item 5.1 is adjournment of the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a roll call vote. Member Fitzpatrick?
Aye.
Member Mock?
Aye.
Member Raffner?
Aye.
Member Wooden?
Aye.
And it's aye for me. And so the motion to adjourn the meeting is passed, and the meeting is adjourned at 9:49 p.m. Good evening.
Good evening.
Everybody have a good night. Bye.